Let's talk about one of the best ways you can leverage your sports career in life after sports. Using the stories from your journey as an athlete to help other people. Okay, how do you do this? How can your story help other people? Well, let's look into that, because once you find that out, you've found gold. That's kind of your education as an athlete. It's what you can bring with you in life. It's your degree. It's one unique asset that you can always contribute with, whether it's to make a point or inspire people to take action on something or shed new light on even an old concept or invent a new product. It's not about bragging or about what you did or accomplished. It's about taking other people on a little journey that will teach them a lesson or give them an emotion or an aha moment in a way. That's storytelling, and that's why I'm super stoked for this episode, because I've invited a storytelling champion to share his wisdom and insight with us today. It's ESPN's Emmy award-winning executive editor to the E60 show, Michael Baltierra. So stay tuned. This is Athlete Story, and I'm your host and coach, Anja Bolbjerg, dedicated to helping athletes like you own your sports career. If you are a world-class athlete or simply into sports, I suggest you subscribe to my show right now, because I'll be posting lots more athlete stories and chats with world-class sports insiders and experts. Before we get on course, let me introduce our guest briefly. Michael Baltierra's career as a storyteller in broadcasting includes 9 years as a producer at ABC News, traveling the world to cover stories and put them into context so that we can relate to them in our own little pond back home. His passion for sport and apparently a great working environment at ESPN led him to become an executive editor for the E60 show. For those of you who don't know the show, it's a weekly sports show, magazine style, where they bring great sports documentaries that are always relatable and relevant, no matter what the sport or the results, because those stories go way beyond sports. Now, knowing Mike, I can already tell you that empathy and the ability to see things from different angles probably part of what makes a champion storyteller. But let's jump in and see what Mike has to say about what makes a good story and how to pitch it, and why he likes to work with athletes. That's always good to hear, right? Okay, let's welcome Michael Baltierra from ESPN. Hi, Mike. Welcome to the show, Athlete Story.
Thank you.
Mike, you're working at ESPN at a program called E60.
That's right. I oversee the show, and what I do in particular is help select the stories that we're going to do and then decide how we're going to tell them. And E60 is a little bit, we call it a news magazine show. So we usually tell in an hour 2 or 3 stories that are like mini movies, which are 15 to 20 minutes long. And the best way to think of them is they're little films.
And the show is on every Sunday morning, is that right?
It's Sunday mornings, and it's obviously ESPN is a sports network, but a lot of the stories that we tell really don't have much to do with sports. They're about sports people, but they're about everything that happens off the field. So it can be a personal story. It can be a story about politics. We recently did a story about the Syrian national soccer team. It can be about anything, but it's really not about the game. It's about people struggling with life, doing things in life, just meeting them and things like that.
All right. So how does a story qualify to be on E60? What are you looking for?
I wish I had the magic formula. It comes down to what excites us, what we get excited about when somebody either sends us a story or we find a story. The group of us who run the show, we sit around and we discuss it, and we generally know pretty quickly if it's something. Generally I say is if one of the first questions you hear is "Tell me more," or then you've got a pretty good story going. That's something there. We like to think of it as, have I heard this before? Are you telling me something new? Are you taking me somewhere new? Are you introducing me to somebody I've never met and want to know more about? Or are you taking something that I think I knew, presenting it in a different way? So meet this athlete. You thought you knew who he was or she was, but their personal story is completely different than what you think. And so it's really finding things that just show you the world in a different way than what you think it is.
Right.
Yeah.
So in a way, it has to be beyond sports. It's not like a news-worthy thing?
Exactly. But obviously there has to be some sports element to it. It can't, otherwise, people who are watching ESPN would say, well, why am I watching this story? But, we use sports as the starting point. So it could be an Olympic athlete who how did they get to be who they are, and the personal struggles or just their life story. It can be, we did a story in South Africa about women soccer players. What are the struggles they have to go through to play in South Africa? And it really doesn't have to do with the sport. It's more about South Africa and living in South Africa. So it's things that anybody can connect to, whether you're a sports fan or not.
And it's global, as I hear it.
It's global, yeah. So ESPN is, I think, in almost 180 countries we're broadcast. So we try to appeal, obviously, we're mainly for the U.S., that's our main channel. But we try to do two things. One, do stories that can run anywhere on ESPN, from China to Latin America to wherever. But for the U.S. audience, because I grew up overseas and still think of myself as being international as much as I can, I try to make sure that the American audience is also aware that it's a big world. It's not just about what's going on in the U.S. So we've done stories, right now we're shooting in Argentina. We just recently did a story in Brazil. We're trying to get to Yemen, which is incredibly difficult. But we're trying to do stories all over, so we see the whole world, not just what's going on in the U.S.
Sounds like a fun job.
Yeah, it is. I can't complain about that. Yeah.
So how did you get into that job? Are you a journalist, or what's your background?
Yeah, I kind of fell into it. I graduated from college and thought, I was going to do a very traditional career path, whether it was business or something like that. And I wasn't passionate about it. Mm-hmm. I had a friend who was a journalist, and he said, why don't you try this? And I tried it, and I thought, this is really interesting. I didn't know that you could do this and make a living. Mm-hmm. And I did that. I was at ABC News, which is the American broadcasting company. Did that for 13 years, covering the world, traveling to war zones and all kinds of things. Oh. And ESPN started E60, the show that I work on now, which they wanted people who weren't necessarily covering sports, but that covered the world. And it sort of worked. And it's, it takes a little bit of the journalism that I used to do with sports and combines it, and we get to do stories. So that's sort of how I ended up here. I never planned it.
No. But yeah. I know you're a good student, so I know you were probably the top choice.
Yeah.
We'll tell them later how I know that. But.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, you gotta stay to the end if you want to know why Mike and I know. Right. Okay, if you're an athlete and you say, I want my story on E60. Yeah. And you have something in mind, of course, not just how would you go about pitching it to you guys?
The biggest thing is to be honest and open. Mm-hmm. And that's very difficult because, you're selling your story to sometimes strangers and trying to get them interested in who you are. And a lot of times that comes with rejection. Some people will be like, I'm not interested. Thank you very much. Or, I like to remind people that we get hundreds and hundreds of stories a year that people send us. And we only do 50 or so a year. So that's, already, even if we wanted to do all of them, there's no way we could do all of them. Mm-hmm. So we have to choose. And sometimes it's, like I said, some stories are obvious. That's an amazing story. We're going to do that. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we just have to decide between two great stories. And there's this one is no good and this one is good. It's just, we're going to choose this one because we think it's better or it's different or it's easier to film or the timing is right. So when you're pitching a story, don't feel down if somebody says no right away. You're going to get a lot of no's. And we've had stories that we've done that are some of our best stories that people tell us, I've been trying to tell this story for years and nobody was paying any attention. So just if you believe in the story, keep selling it.
And how long is like a place like yours? How long is the timeline from you get a pitch to you actually have a show?
It really depends. I mean, we've done stories that we do in 2 days because they have to get on really fast. Mm-hmm. So we go in, we film it, we edit it, we put it on, and it's on the air. That's very rare. On average, 3 to 6 months. We'll get the story, we'll start filming it, then we go into edit, we watch it, we revise it, we screen it, and then it finally gets onto the air. We've had stories that we've shot over 3 or 4 years. Again, that's the extreme, but because something in the story keeps changing, or that's just the way it happened. We like to think of it as we let the story dictate when it's ready to be told, and if there's something still happening in the story, we're not done, so we wait. And we've had more stories than I can remember. 2 or 3 years later, it finally airs, and people get very frustrated. It's like, why haven't you edited? It's like, because it's not done yet. We haven't figured out what happens at the end, or this big thing is happening. So.
Yeah, because I guess it has to follow this famous story arc, and you can't just end it on a big open loop.
When you were asking how we decide what we want to do, and when people pitch us stories, the best stories for us are the ones we don't know how they're going to end. So when people pitch us a story and it's already done, it's a little bit harder for us to say yes, because it's already in the past. And when you're filming a story and people already know how it ends, the people you're interviewing or who are telling the story, then it loses a little bit of magic because you're not in the moment. But if someone says, this is happening, and, for example, if you're doing a story of an athlete and they don't know if they're going to win the championship or not, you can film before and get the excitement or the nervousness, and the interviews they're telling you about, I hope I win, I hope this happens. And then we're there for the championship game, and you see it. Mm-hmm. If that's already happened, then it loses that. No matter what you do, you just can't recreate as much of that. Right. So we like to find stories that we don't know where it's going to end. We know there's going to be an exciting end, but we don't know if it's going to end here or there.
Okay, I guess I can understand that. It's as if we were going to go watch a movie, and we already knew how it ended.
It can still be good. It can still be good, but it's much more exciting when you don't know what's going to happen at the end. And we rely on interviews, and the people even being interviewed, if they know how it's going to end when you're interviewing them, or they know, I know I'm going to win, they answer questions in a very different way, and it's hard to explain, but you can see it when if we're interviewing somebody right before they're going to go onto the field to play. Mm-hmm. They're nervous, they're excited, they don't know what's going to happen. If we interview them after the game, or, 2 weeks after the game, and they already know they lost, it's very different. They don't have the same emotion, and when we're telling that story, the viewer can tell the difference. And so that's what we try to find.
So you got to think of that excitement or the surprise factor, and you got to think about the tell me more. Those are the two important things.
Tell me more. Tell me more. Tell me something. And again, it's some ways. It's like when you're at a cocktail party or at a party with new people, and do you want to talk to somebody at a party and they're telling you something so exciting you don't want to walk away, or they're telling you a story that you already know and you're like you're looking for somebody else to talk to because it's not very interesting, and that's really what it is. All
right. And are there things that would automatically disqualify a story?
No, never. I mean, we like the nice thing is that we have no rules. Mm-hmm. Really, sometimes people ask us, are there certain sports? Are there certain types of... No. We've done stories on everything you can imagine. Obviously, the big sports, Olympic sports and all that, but we've done stories on dog contests, spelling bees, cheese rolling, which is this crazy thing and they do in England where they roll a cheese down the hill and people try to catch it.
That does sound crazy.
Yeah, I mean... and not every story has to be serious. Some of them are fun, and some of them are crazy, and some of them make you cry. But we don't say, "Oh, we're only doing this type of story," because there are a lot of stories out there that we want to introduce people to. That we did a story on competitive eating, which is crazy, and the characters are unbelievable. And people were telling us, "What are you doing? That's not a sport." And it's like, well, it's a competition, and it was great, and it was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Okay. So, how can you make, if you have a story, you have a point, you have a message?
Yeah.
What would be a good idea to kind of build up your story so that you get that excitement? Is there any formula for that?
There's several tips. There's no formula, but there are tips, things to always remember. One of them to me is does it excite you? Because if it doesn't excite you, then you shouldn't be trying to share it, because then just because you think somebody might be interested, you have to be interested in it, and you have to want to tell it, because that comes across when you're sharing it with people and trying to pitch it. But also, you're a member of the audience. If you're interested, then there's going to be somebody else that's interested out there. So if you're not interested, then find another story. And part of that is what is interesting about the story? What makes that story interesting to you? What makes it exciting or emotional? What makes you happy? What makes you sad? And those are the things, we like when we're putting our stories together. One of the things we remind people is, there's a difference between a report and a story. A report is, here are the facts, here's what happened, this, and then this, and then this, and this day, and that's not a story. That's what you get in school when they tell you memorize these things. And, that's why school sometimes isn't very exciting, because they just give you reports of facts. Mm-hmm. The story takes that timeline of the report and takes you up and down. This was the high when people were very high, excited and happy. And then all of a sudden something happened here and they went down. And this was when they were really down in the story. And then they would go back up. And then, so the story is the up and down. And right. That's what we want. Don't tell me the facts, because the facts are easy. Everybody knows the facts. Tell me the ups and downs.
So what you're saying is you got to involve the emotions behind.
Absolutely. And that's where the scary part is, because you have to tell me, one of the first things we ask when we do stories about athletes is, what was the moment when you were the lowest? Mm-hmm. And that's a very vulnerable, if they're honest, that can be very vulnerable. But that's when it gets really good, when they tell you honestly, what was the worst moment? And what was your best moment? And then if they're honest, then the rest is easy, because then they can have to explain why and how did they get there. If they're not honest, then it's not an interesting story. If they just say what you expect, then it's not very good.
And do you ever do stories where the people involved actually don't really want to be in that story?
Oh, all the time. One of the biggest part of our job is convincing people to do it. And I'm always amazed, because I think, gosh, if somebody asked me to do this, I probably would say no, because it's very personal. And we're asking people to talk about their best moments, but also their worst moments, when they're vulnerable, what things upset them, how hard it was to do something, to come back from an injury, or think that your career is over, whatever it is. And then we're asking them to let cameras film that, mm-hmm. and go into their lives with cameras, and whether it's at home or their family, or that's very personal. So a lot of our job is convincing people to let us do that. And the way we do it is to say, listen, we're going to be honest. We're not going to, and we're going to be respectful. We're not going to just show up and be disrespect your life and your experience. We're there to listen to you. And what we find is that most people, the vast majority, at the end of the process are very, very happy with it. And that doesn't mean that they love the story. That just means that they understand what we did and how we did it. And that for some people, it's like therapy. They get it out, and they share things with sometimes family members that family members didn't know, or fans, or whatever it is, or things that they didn't even realize. So it's overall just a positive thing. Yeah.
But if you've done something bad, like if you're a Larry Nassar, or
yeah,
and then how do you go get the story?
Yeah, well, sometimes you'd be surprised. Sometimes people like that want to talk, and we talk a lot about, when we interview somebody like that, what are the questions, and how are we going to approach it? Because we don't want to get into a yes, you did it, you didn't do it, you did it, because that doesn't go anywhere. So we spend a lot of time getting our interviews prepared, and how we're going to do it, and the questions we're going to ask. And again, sometimes you'd be surprised. People say yes to interviews for a million different reasons. Some people are narcissists, and they love to be in front of a camera. Some people think that they're right, and they'll try to explain why they're right. And you're amazed that they sit down. I mean, we've had athletes who are accused of using performance-enhancing drugs, sexual abuse, violence. They sit down, and they try to explain why they're right, or their side of the story. And that's what we tell them. It's like, we're just here to hear your side of the story, so this is your opportunity to tell us that. Sometimes they say no. And if they say no, then we have to decide, is it worth trying to tell the story without the person? Right. And sometimes we can't. I mean, Larry Nassar is a perfect example. We did a full hour on him, and obviously he didn't sit down. But we had all the people who accused him, all the people who worked with him, and you can tell a story a lot of times without the person, as long as you have other people around who know him or her. We did a full hour on Sepp Blatter of FIFA, and he refused to sit down with us. But we did it because we had a lot of people who had worked with him, who knew him, who grew up with him, and could tell his story without him there.
And are there places you wouldn't go in a show like that?
What do you mean? Physically or like emotionally?
Well, politically or...
We never say no, which is good and bad. The one thing we respected are people's privacy. If they don't, if private people, not public people, because that's a whole different category. If private people, this is when you report and you find out things, there are things that you have to decide, is this something we want to make public or not? And we have long discussions about the impact that has and why we would make it public if it's a private person. And sometimes we decide, it's not, as journalists and as people, we can't do that because there's no reason to do that. Other times, if they're public figures or it's for the greater good, even though it might be uncomfortable, we decide we have to report it and put it in the story. So it really depends. We do it case by case because, again, it's hard to say this is how we're going to handle it every time. But the way I like to think of it is, if it happened and it's real, then we shouldn't shy away from it. And a lot of times we take on topics like Larry Nassar or all kinds of things in sports that people want to try to avoid. We don't want to avoid them. We want to talk about them. What we don't do is take a side. If we do something that's political, we won't choose a side. We'll just say, here's the issue, here's what we know about it, and hopefully at the end of the story, you can discuss it and decide what you think. But, we did a story, healthcare in the U.S. and health insurance is a big problem because there are a lot of people who don't have health insurance. And especially young athletes who are in school, if they get injured, some of them don't have any health insurance. So we did a big story about that. But it wasn't about how should the U.S. handle, what should they do? What should the politicians do? It was just about the athletes. If you get injured, here's what your life is going to be like because you may not have insurance. And then we let people decide what they think about that and how it should be solved. But we don't take a position.
Right. I know that there's quite a few former athletes working at ESPN.
Yes, a lot. And most of, I'd say, probably 30 to 40%, if not more. I mean, probably more because there are professional athletes who were incredibly successful who work here, but also everybody else here loves sports generally. So they either played in high school or college or in some way. So there are a lot of athletes here, which makes sense because we do sports.
Yeah. But are there any other reasons why ESPN likes to use athletes? Or?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the obvious is you have to love what you're doing. So we cover sports. We talk about sports all the time. So obviously people who've competed have an immediate connection to that and a passion. I think as someone who didn't play sports at a high level, what I see and when we hire people, what's great about having former athletes is that work ethic, unbelievable. I mean, you can't find people who can focus and be dedicated in the way that former athletes are. Passion, teamwork. I mean, all the things that it takes to be a competitive athlete make you generally an unbelievable worker, colleague. So those things, I used to work at ABC News, which is a completely different environment. Here, I always laugh. It's like when we focus on a goal at ESPN, everybody's focused and it gets done in ways that I've never reached before. And that's because everybody has that background as an athlete and the passion. When they have the goal, then they know what they need to do to get there, and they're not going to generally stop until they do it. So I think that makes ESPN incredibly, A, fun to work at, and B, successful. I mean, I see it every day. It's like, oh my gosh, people are here late. They're working hard. In the same way that, when you're training for something, you don't stop when the game is over. You keep going and you think about, how do I get better? How do I do the next thing? And that's the same thing when we're hiring people. It's like, this is the type of person we want, because they're not going to just do what we ask them. They're going to do that, and then they're going to think about, what can I do next? What can I get to make it better? How do I go to the next step?
Okay, so let me just linger a little bit on that because that's sweet music in my ear. And probably in most of the people listening too.
Yeah.
So if you're an athlete and you just retired or about to retire or you're looking for a job, just find confidence in what Mike just said, that you have these qualities. And,
no question. And you'd be surprised how many people don't have those qualities. So it sets you apart so quickly that you already have a track record, no pun intended, of achievement, of high-level achievement. That to me is, if you've achieved in one field, you can transfer that to any other field, because a lot of times people ask me, well, how do I get into TV? How do I do this? It's like, we can teach you those skills, the day-to-day, like how do I press the button on this and how do I do that? What I can't teach you is hard work, passion, desire to succeed, team effort, all that stuff. That I can't teach you. I can ask you, but I can't teach you.
Right.
I can teach you all the other stuff of how does E60 make a story. I can help you get along that. The other stuff, it's people who've been doing it for a long time, and it's immediately you're in that top percentage of people that walk in looking for a job. Okay,
so while we're at that, is in the recruiting thing, is there a gender balance to respect? Or because it seems to be very male-dominated.
Yes, I mean, absolutely. Especially in the U.S. For sports networks, it's for a long time been heavily male. That's changing, and that's changing a lot, thankfully, because everywhere it's changing. I can only talk about ESPN because that's what ESPN is owned by Disney. And Disney has made an incredible effort, and ESPN has made an incredible effort to sort of knock down barriers and make everything available to everybody. And I've been here 10 years, I've seen a change from when I got here to today of just walking into the office and who's there and who's in charge of things and who's doing what than 10 years ago. It is completely different. And again, ESPN, the way we look at it is, why would we not try to appeal to everybody? Because that means your audience is much bigger. So, there are always initiatives about international stories. Like, of course, we want to appeal internationally to women, to younger, to certain sports. They're constantly looking. So it's becoming much more open to everybody. It's not there yet, but it's getting there. It's going in the right direction. But again, that's something, when we talked about how do you pitch a story or how do you pitch yourself, it's like, what makes you unique and different, whether it's the sport you play, who you are, your background, use that to your advantage as opposed to like, well, I'm not like everybody else. That's a plus. You're not like everybody else.
Exactly. Well, I like to say that like some people have an MBA and you have your athlete story. So don't try to use all your power to fit in. Use that to stand out and make a difference.
We get a lot more people with MBAs coming in for interviews than people with unique athlete stories. That's much more exciting.
So talk about this whole development of ESPN and the sports TV. How do you see the future of sports on TV with all these new opportunities for self-broadcasting and doing like what I'm doing with Athlete Story and my little scale?
I think they're what I see. There are two ways of thinking of it. There are people, at ESPN, people who are very scared. It's like, oh my gosh, it's changing so fast. Technology's changing. Our kids can watch games on their phone and and they get scared and think, how do we protect what we had? Big network, TV, we control everything. Then there are other people who say, this is a great opportunity because everybody can get this. Everybody can turn on their phone. Everybody can have their own show. Everybody can do it. And I like to think of it that way. It's like, I watch my kids. They can watch any sport at any time, however they want, whenever they want. That's fantastic. It lets you think of like, okay, so what do we do with that? And it lets you be more creative. It's harder in some ways because there are more people doing it. But what we like to think of is like, if we do it better than everybody else, people are still going to come to us and watch it, or to whoever. The goal is always quality. Just do it really, really well and offer people something that they can't get anywhere else. And that's the key. People will immediately know if it's good or not, and and they will decide, is this worth my time? Am I going to spend time doing this? And that's what you have to focus on. Not, oh my gosh, there's so many people out there. No, it's fine. There are always going to be a lot of people. But are you telling them something that they want to hear or want to see? And that's the key. So, yeah.
And if you can keep surprising them, I guess, with your
absolutely
rolling cheese and
it's the hardest thing, and it's very easy, and we've seen it a million times of companies that were the top, and then 10 years later they're gone. I mean, especially now, things move so fast. There was a time where Apple was almost bankrupt, and now look at it, and MySpace and a bunch of companies that just don't exist anymore. Look at the record business. So that's going to keep happening. So, a lot of what our bosses on the show and what we try to do is, okay, last year was great, fantastic. Now we have to work harder because last year was fantastic. What do we do differently? We can't just keep doing the same thing because the audience will leave as soon as they get bored or they find something better. So we have to keep changing. And that's hard because what you want to do is like, that was a great year. Let's just do it again and do it again. No, we have to change it. So,
yeah. Well, I guess being a Disney corporation, you're kind of the kings of reinvention and staying relevant.
Well, I mean, that's what they put. That's what they want us to do. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I mean, they also own a lot of TV stations, and TV is, it's changing. And is it going to be there in 10 years? Probably not the way we know it, because it just, as a business, it doesn't work. But people will still want to watch things. It'll just be different. So, yeah, but I mean, what Disney does is they realize, and they're a pretty good example, they realize, what, the way we did business, it's completely changed. So that's why they bought ESPN, they bought, Pixar and Lucasfilms and Marvel Comics, and now they're starting their own Netflix type business because they realize that's how people are getting things now. We can't just sit here and say, oh, we're Disney, we're so big, people will still come to us. No. So will it work? Hopefully, because we all want it to work, but that's a risk, and they're changing it completely, knowing that they have to. They have no choice. Either they're going to change it or they're going to disappear at some point.
Well, I guess sports has the advantage of, as long as it's the coverage of big events, that those events are there.
Absolutely.
And you can't just go out and copy that.
Exactly. I mean, that's again to, if you're an athlete, you understand that. Like there's a power in, whatever your sport is, whatever, like people want to watch that in the moment, not like in 3 weeks or like they want to watch it. Those are moments that are happening live that people want to watch. And if you understand that and can use that, then there's power in that.
So let's say that I'm an athlete and I'm preparing for the next Olympics.
Yeah.
And I think, it would be so cool if they would just bring my story up to the Olympics so that people know a little bit more. Maybe they'll follow me during the Olympics. Can they send their pitch to E60?
Yeah, absolutely. We get stories from everywhere, from directly from athletes, from agents, from book publisher, from families. Grandmas on the show send things in. Like, it doesn't matter. If it's a good story, we'll follow it. And the key is to, again, present it in a way that makes you want to know more, or that is, if you're an Olympic athlete, know that sort of my event is happening at this point in time. When should I start pitching it? Because if it's too early, nobody's going to really pay attention. And then if it's too late, nobody's going to care. So know that moment of when it's right to do and use that. And I always tell people, don't be afraid to, again, it's so much easier now to reach people, whether it's email or LinkedIn or Skype, whatever. You can just reach out to people. You'd be surprised how easy it is to reach out And sometimes they ignore you, and sometimes that's fine. Don't take it personally. But you'd be surprised how often they respond.
Right.
And you can at least have a communication with them. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't, that's fine too. But don't reject it yourself before you, like, let other people reject your story before you do. Because if you even try, then it's never going to happen. You know, there's nothing more satisfying than finding something in your inbox or a message somewhere that's like, here's this, hey, hi, here's a great story. And you say, hey, that is a great story. And you immediately reply because you recognize it.
So if there's like a ratio of pitched stories to the stories that you've dug out somehow using yours?
I found most of them myself.
Yeah.
No.
You invent them.
No, it's you know, it's from everywhere. I'd say it's all over the place. You know, obviously our staff is always looking for stories, so that helps because they're constantly looking and we know what we want. Sometimes you just stumble into something and you think, oh my gosh, this is incredible. I'd say 40% comes from our staff, 20% from people outside, another 20% just randomly, and then the rest is who knows. So I think the key is figure out when is the right time to pitch your story and how to pitch it, and pitch it to the right people. Sometimes we get story pitches that are like, this is a great story, but it's not for us. You know, it's not a story that we would do.
So how do you find out who's the right people?
You watch. And, you know, so for example, if you try to tell us a story about a politician, and this is obviously an extreme example, we're like, that's a great story, but we don't do stories on politics. So know the people know what they produce, you know, whether it's their show.
Okay, so you mean you know your media. But
yeah,
what about who to pitch it to? Because there's not just you there.
Yeah. Again, do a little research. I mean, and sometimes it's, you know, when I started, I would watch the end of the show and see the credits. Who's there? And get names, write them down, and then find their email. And it's a lot of times it's really easy because emails are a formula. It's like usually last name or first name, last name @company.com.
Right.
And you can find it, or do a Google search, find their LinkedIn page, talk to people, like whoever you know, pop them an email. And people love to talk about themselves. So if you send them a question and say, hey, I'd love to hear more about you and your experience. Most people will be like, yes, absolutely. I want to tell you about me. Don't be shy about that, because even if you send 100 emails or texts or whatever, and you only get 30 back, that's a lot. That's a huge amount. I mean, you probably only get 10 back, but that's already, you've gotten 10 connections. And if I get a call and it's something that I know isn't for us, I'll be like, you know, if I know somebody, I'll say, you know what, this might work with this other show at ESPN or somebody I know. If I think it's a good idea, I'm not just going to throw it away. I'm just going to say, wait a minute, this might be good for our other show. So the more you push your story and find the people and talk to people, the more eventually it's going to land where it should land.
Right.
But a lot of times people just, I mean, again, the other side of that is sometimes we get emails and we never hear back from people. Again, if that person isn't interested enough in their story to call me or to try to reach out to me, then why should I try to reach? Right. You have to show the passion. Otherwise, we're not going to try to follow up.
Right.
Yeah. And again, it's very easy to find who's, you know, if I was interested in your podcast, I'm sure I could find your contact information, and I'd write an email to Anja and say, hey, Anja, I love what you did. Can you tell me more about that? Or here's an idea for a show or whatever. And that's how that works much better than any other way of doing it.
Okay, so I'm going to send you an email tomorrow.
That's right.
No, I'm just thinking, like if you're an athlete and you got injured, or you're preparing for the big event and you got injured or something happened that kind of messed up your plan totally. And you're like, am I going to make it now? And what's happening? Am I going to lose my sponsors? Am I going to lose my funding? What you could do, if I understood it right, is you could pitch this story as a what's going to happen to me now kind of story. And then maybe you would want to follow if you were preparing for the Olympics, and you got this injury, and now is she even going to be able to compete at the...
Absolutely. That's a lot of the stories that we do are just that. You know, our athletes who tell us, I don't know if this is it for me. We did earlier this year, Lindsey Vonn, and you know, most people know a little bit about her story. So we wanted her to talk more about the injuries and the times where she thought her career was over, and you know, when she was going to stop, and what it would take. And you know, her grandfather passed away, who she was very close to, and she thought she wouldn't be able to come back from that. So that's what makes the story interesting, because the least interesting stories that we do are the ones that the person started here, they trained really hard, they got really, really good, they were better than everybody else, and they won the championship. That's so boring, because nothing ever happens. The stories that are great are
the ups and downs.
Here, nobody expected me, I was really bad, and then I got really good, but then I got injured, and the doctors told me I would never play again, but I came back, and then something else happened, and I thought, I don't want to do this anymore, and then I came back, and then I won. Those are the stories we all love, because...
Sounds like my story.
Yeah, I mean, you can identify. We've all had ups and downs, and that's what you want to see. It's, you know, I'm not going to be an Olympic athlete, but I can identify with someone who's had been down and wanted to give up, but didn't, and fought back. And that's what you want to see, and that's what sports is great at, is that there's so many examples of people who fought through that, whether it's pain, losing their sponsors, injuries, whatever, and they fight back. And that's why people love to watch the games and our shows, is because you get inspired and you think, they did it, I can do it. In whatever I do in life.
But the growth or the development of that person in the story could actually also be, doesn't have to be results-wise, it could be, I learnt this. I was this cocky, stupid, whatever, and then this thing happened, and now I know that humility and and respect are good values that I'm going to nurture.
Absolutely.
Whatever.
And that's you know, for us, that's the cornerstone of storytelling. Person starts here. If at the end they're still that same person, that's not a good story. They start here, and at the end they're a different person. And, you know, that can be whatever you want it to be, but they have to be a different person, because we've seen them go through a lot of things, and then at the end they're more humble, or they're more appreciative, or they're whatever it is, they're different at the end. And you know, a lot of times our stories don't end well. They don't win. Like, the athlete doesn't win, but that's fine. That's sometimes that's more interesting than if they win, because that's real life. That's like, you know, a lot of times it doesn't work out, but that's okay.
I'm so glad you say this, because a lot of athletes will say, well, I never won anything. What am I going to go out do speeches about? But it's just the opposite almost. Like, it's you've been more interesting.
You have a better perspective, and I can say this from the professional athletes who work, you know, former professional athletes who work at ESPN. The ones who tend to be, and this is a generalization, who tend to be better at their job are not the ones that were superstars. You know, most of the good analysts and commentators were, you know, average, and I say average, you know, they weren't superstars, because they have a different perspective. And so when they comment on a game, they're more insightful, and they have more interesting things to say, and they can give you, you know, think about things. The superstars sometimes, they can't connect, because they were superstars, and so they were always winning, and they were always great. So they don't understand why everybody isn't great, and so that's an advantage. I mean, you can, you know, just because you weren't the champion doesn't mean you can't be a great sports broadcaster or a great storyteller in sports or whatever it is. You probably have a bigger experience and know more about the sport because you were watching more, you were paying more attention, and you had to work harder. So, for sure, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for all this, because I hope that you just inspired a lot of athletes who are to go out and tell their story, to go out and use their story and leverage it to bring value to other people's lives through what they've been through. So
yes, one of the things that we say, sometimes our producers come back to like, oh, I wanted to do a story on this person, but they don't have a story, really a good story, and most of the time is that we just haven't found the story that they have, because we all have a story. You have to have at least one good story in you.
Yeah.
You just haven't figured out.
Yeah, I was just going to say we all have it. Many stories.
Yeah. You just have to figure out how to tell it, and also how to tell it to the people that are interested. So everybody has a great story, and that's the key, is to find which one it is you want to tell, and to the right people. And once you do that, then it all works. Then it's easy. And
if I just hold on to what you just said before, if that story can show some kind of a transformation, absolutely. That makes it a good story. in any competition, we don't end up in the same place. You don't everybody's not in the same place from when you begin to the end. That's the same thing with stories. It's like there have to be people who are up and people who are down at the end, and that's what we're looking for. Is like that change, like what happened. Tell me how it happened and what happened, and at the end, we're all different. Different. We have a different view of life or experience or your sport because you just did that. Yeah, and then let us in on the whole emotional roller coaster. Athletes know that better than everybody, because every competition is an emotional up and down. Every competition, you know that at any minute you could be at the top, or any minute you could be at the bottom in a second. So that's but what every athlete also knows is pretty much how to control those emotions. And yes, according to what you're saying, if you want to make your story great and relatable, and it's not about controlling your emotions. Now it's about letting people in and being honest, feeling it with you. Being honest. And some people are honest and it's not emotional, but it's powerful. And some people are honest and they're incredibly emotional. Right. And yes, that you're right. For athletes, that's sometimes the hardest thing, is to just let go and realize, don't try to control this. Just be honest. Tell me the truth, whatever you see the truth to be. And that's what people like to see in stories. I mean, think about in sports, the most memorable, powerful moments for you in any competition. It's when the athlete is celebrating or crying or getting emotional. So that's what you remember, not when they were in complete control usually. It's like the moments where they let go of that. And that's the same thing for the stories. Like, you have to show that, because that's what people connect with. Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I think this has been great help. Great tips there. Yeah. Awesome. So, thanks. Should we tell them how I know you're a good student? Yeah, well, sure. So the thing is, back in the days, Mike and I went to the same high school at the American School of Paris. And the reason why we're here talking today is that we actually just had a little reunion not so long ago. And I asked Mike if he wanted to come and share some of his insider wisdom from sports. So thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. My pleasure, Anja. All right, talk to you soon. Talk to you soon. Okay, bye.